And welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. 6 months ago, BP's Deepwater Horizon oil rig blew up in the Gulf of Mexico, killing 11 workers and triggering the worst oil spill disaster in U.S. history. The explosion leaked over 200 million gallons of oil, which is nearly 5 million barrels of oil, into the Gulf of Mexico and fouled coastlines in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. With the Macondo oil well now sealed, the spill is no longer in the headlines, and last week Interior Secretary Ken Salazar announced that the Gulf was once again, quote, open for business. But much of the oil that gushed out of the blown-out well remains dispersed deep under the sea, and scientists are still unclear about the long-term effects of both the oil and the chemical dispersant on marine ecosystems.
6 months since the spill, lawmakers have been slow to take action, and the House's spill response bill remains stalled in the Senate. On Wednesday, 3 environmental groups sued BP, accusing the British oil giant of violating the Endangered Species Act. The suit, brought by Defenders of Wildlife, Gulf Restoration Network, and the Save the Manatee Club, notes that at least 27 endangered or threatened animal species live in the Gulf region, including 5 species of endangered sea turtles and 4 species of endangered whales. In a moment, we'll be speaking with the acclaimed writer and environmentalist Terry Tempest Wiliams, who spent 2 weeks traveling the Gulf Coast this summer. She's written an extended piece about the story she heard on her visit to what she calls the world's largest offshore oil disaster. Her piece is called The Gulf Between Us, and it was published in the November-December issue of Orion magazine. She's the author of several books, including, most recently, Finding Beauty in a Broken World and the Open Space of Democracy. She'll be joining us from Salt Lake City, Utah, after this break. As we turn now to Terry Tempest Wiliams, writer, environmentalist. Her books include Finding Beauty in a Broken World and the Open Space of Democracy. Her latest piece in Orion magazine, an extended reflection on the BP oil spill called The Gulf Between Us. Terry Tempest Wiliams, welcome to Democracy Now! From Salt Lake City. You went to the Gulf on the 6-month anniversary. What are your reflections about what happened April 20th? I'll never forget it because it was Earth Day.
That's right. I think it changed all of us who were paying attention. And Amy, I just want to thank you for your program, first of all, that we can even have this conversation.
Well,
reflections. It's, yeah, you know, we hear that 5 million barrels of oil were released from the Macondo well. We know that 632 miles were oiled in 4 states, 400 species of animals threatened from this, 400 controlled burns that killed hundreds of sea turtles and untold numbers of dolphins and sea mammals. We're told that it's over, that the story is gone, as is the oil. And what I can tell you in reflecting over 6 months is that the oil is not gone. The people are still there, and they're getting sicker and sicker. And I just think it's really important that at this anniversary of 6 months that we begin to really hear from the people on the ground. And that's what my purpose was. You know, I have a pen, I'm a writer. I was home in Utah thinking, you know, what can I do? And I had to go. I had to see it for myself. So it was about ground truthing. It was about bearing witness. And I don't think bearing witness is a passive act.
Well, Terry Tempest Wiliams, this is an extraordinary piece as you talk about and you relate basically the words of a variety of people on the ground. And I was struck by one particular passage when you were interviewing a Margaret Curole, and she says to you, here's the truth, where are the animals? There's no toodaloos, the little one-armed fiddler crabs. You don't hear birds from Amelia to Alabama. Kevin never saw a fish jump, never heard a bird sing. This is their nesting season. Those babies are not going nowhere. We had a very small pot of sperm whales in the Gulf. Nobody's seen them. Guys on the water say they died in the spill and their bodies were hacked up and taken away. And she goes on to say, fish are swimming in circles. Dolphins are choking on the surface. It's ugly, I'm telling you, and nobody's talking about it. You're not hearing nothing about it. As far as the media is reporting, everything's been cleaned up and it's not a problem. Tell us about some of these.
That's the power of Margaret Carell.
Yes. What about some of the other stories?
You know, what I love about the voices in this piece, the voices in the Gulf that I heard, the people in place, standing up, standing for their home ground, was exactly that kind of passion, that kind of truth-telling. Margaret Carell and her husband Kevin are Cajun. They're shrimpers. And they talked about how there's two alternatives in the Gulf. You either shrimp or you work in the oil fields. And, you know, I learned something from them. I have been against, you know, deepwater drilling, and they were talking about the moratorium, how it needs to be lifted so that people can eat. So it was through Margaret that I really began to see the complexity of this situation. I love her feistiness. She, with an artist friend, created on the beach at Grand Isle human bodies that spelled out messages, which they took pictures of and texted to Congress, to the governor, to BP executives, to everyone in power they could think of. The three messages laid out in bodies were never again, Paradise Lost, and WTF. What I can tell you about Margaret is that she received calls from the BP claims department saying to back off. She was taken to lunch by two agents from Homeland Security, and this is serious. And she said, they want me to shut up, and I will not. Another story, she told us to, if we wanted great Cajun food, and that we couldn't understand this story unless we ate, to go to Becky DeWay's deli in Galliano, which is where they're from, in southern Louisiana. We went to Becky DeWay's deli, called Jordan's, named after her son. It was 10 o'clock at night. The lights were still on. We walked in. She said the grill's closed. And then she proceeded to tell stories that in Cajun country, they've always viewed themselves as rich, that the bounty is from the waters, that as long as you had rice, beans, and bread, and had a chicken neck that you could throw into the bayou, you were wealthy. Just a few weeks ago, I received a note from Becky, who's become a good friend. She said, we're starving, Terry. There are no fish in the waters, and any fish we would see, we would not eat. These are the stories that are coming out of the Gulf. These are the stories that we're not hearing from the media. I think about a group of women in gated communities in Alabama, just off of Mobile Bay, Orange Beach. These women took the situation into their own hands because no one was responding. They had water samples taken, 4 from very wealthy areas. The fourth one on Dauphin Island blew up and was deemed inconclusive. These women, Robin Young, a captain, Lori DeAngelis and her husband Mike, their blood tests came back high in cadmium and benzene. They've had chemically induced pneumonia. These are the stories, again, that we're not hearing.
We're talking to Terry Tempest Wiliams, writer and environmentalist. Her latest piece is in Orion magazine called The Gulf Between Us, Stories of Terror and Beauty from the World's Largest Accidental Offshore Oil Disaster. Terry, tell us about Jerry Cope and Fish Camp Landing, the gated community in Orange Beach, Alabama.
Yeah, those were the women I was referring to. I met Jerry in March of 2009 at the climate action in Washington, D.C. I call him a guerrilla journalist. While I was down there, he was there also with Charles Hambleton, one of the producers and members of the crew that you see in the film The Cove. They had heard about the bodies of dolphins being taken to dumps, refrigerated to Mexico. They wanted to do an investigative witnessing if these stories were true. Jerry, in the 3 weeks that he was out on the Gulf, he also came down with chemical-induced pneumonia, ended up meeting these activists, these women in the gated community, and Robin Young among them, who started this organization called Guardians of the Gulf. It was there that he really saw on the ground, as did I, what the situation is. These women were calling, as I said, for water samples, air samples, blood tests, to really show the seriousness of the public health issues. And again, these are the stories that we're not hearing. Upper respiratory diseases, lots of skin infection, rashes. When I was there, they were having to drain the swimming pools because children were being sick. And Amy, it made you sick. You'd go down to Gulf Shores, and here were these seemingly pristine beaches, this Corexit green, this ungodly color, women, mothers, you know, overburdened, 110-degree heat. Their children were playing in the waves. It was like there was no connection between what was in the water and what was seeping into their children's skin. I mean, the stories are heartbreaking. We walked down the beach several miles to the Gulf Island National Seashore. Again, what seemed to be white, pristine beaches. There had just been a thunderstorm. It was this eerie color of the water. Again, you half expected the water to burst into flames with lightning strikes. Just then, a BP bus pulled up, 30 workers, some of them in hazmat suits. We started talking to them saying, well, it doesn't look like there's oil here. Two of the workers, African-American men in their 20s, smiled and said, can we tell you that we just took out 2,000 pounds last night? We work from dusk to dawn under the cover of darkness.
You also talk about
That's a ton of oil. I was just going to say that's a ton of oil taken out in a 100-yard swatch. Again, these are the stories we're not hearing. I just talked to Robin yesterday, and she was saying that 5 minutes she had tar balls the size of baseballs. And, you know, you go down a foot, and that's where the oil still remains.
You also talk about those workers and the boat captains that are still working for BP and some of the illnesses that they're being exposed to, and also that their clothes are being confiscated, while at the same time BP's telling them that they probably just have dermatitis.
That's right. The doctors don't even know how to treat these diseases that are coming forward.